Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. It's Naomi Wolf. It's the 29th of December, and I am here to report on two things, both of them pretty sad. Um, One is the actual impeachment resolution that impeached the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And the other is a quick update on the Australian wildfires and the status of the crisis in Australian democracy. Please forgive my elderly and emotional dog. So I want to start with an update on Australia. And I know that it seems perhaps a bit odd to talk about another country when I'm about to segue into reading the impeachment resolution for the President of the United States. But assaults on democracy are global. The same playbook is being played out around the world in democracies around the world, as I've written and said many times. These oligarchs, this is a nonpartisan thing to say, it's oligarchs who are trying to basically get, wrest control of resources and of electoral systems from citizens so that they can own everything. They have the same consultants and they're using the same strategies in democracies around the world. So we're seeing this in the United States, assaults on democracy in Brazil, assaults on democracy in England, and Australia has really turned into a kind of horrific test case for how far you can push a modern developed democracy and how thoroughly you can strip it of resources and leave kind of everything in the hands of a handful of cronies. It's extraordinary. So if you've missed it, some of the dramas of the last week have been that the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison was vacationing in Hawaii when the country was basically burning. Tens of thousands of residents now in the state of Victoria have been urged to evacuate immediately in order to survive, as escalating bushfires are threatening an area the size of a small country. The emergency chief, Andrew Crisp, said that people in the region had to leave by tomorrow morning to avoid a horrific inferno, essentially. Highways are shut down, and there's just this catastrophic level of wildfires, especially around the coasts of Australia, which has led to 30,000 people being threatened in this part of the country as these severe fire warnings are being issued. So what the deal is that makes this not just another horrific natural disaster is that climate change has been at the forefront of the dry conditions that have led to this extraordinary inferno of this country. And yet Scott Morrison told the press that now is not the time to talk about climate change. Other issues are that many people in Australia feel that this administration is really in the pocket of fossil fuels, and that's why they're delaying taking action on climate change and saying now is not the time to talk about it. Other issues are that firefighters are under-resourced in Australia. Many of them are volunteer firefighters, which other countries think is really extraordinary. What brave people to face such crises without even being paid. But they don't have what they need to fight the fires. The fires really are ringing the entire continent. The maps are really stunning. And a truly tragic disaster in the middle of all these disasters is that New South Wales, which is Australia's most populous koala habitat, is facing the fact that up to 9,000 koalas might have been killed in the fires, which is a third of the koala population, a third of the koala population. Other ecologists have said that 480 million animals could have been killed since the fire started in September. 12 million acres have been burned and 8 people have been killed. So, what's kind of incredible to me about this drama is that Scott Morrison and his team seem to really be signaling that they're not elected officials the way we traditionally understand leaders of a democracy. he keeps doing things that are baffling the people of Australia, like going on vacation and not telling people where he's going, even though that should be a matter of public record. There have been assaults on democracies in Australia, ranging from, and I reported on these last video, ranging from uh, reporters uh, being having their travel plans turned over to the police or sought by the police, to FOIA requests. There was a report in The Guardian that almost 97% of FOIA requests have not been fulfilled the way they should. That's freedom of information requests. Many of the people who are writing into me at DailyClout are saying, from Australia, are saying that there's, and I experienced it in a phone call that many of you saw on video to Angus Taylor's office, that there's a kind of nobody's home attitude, or other people call it gaslighting, a complete lack of accountability. But it's almost like beyond a lack of accountability. It's not like bad elected officials. It's almost, to me, big picture, it seems like a demonstration that someone else is in charge now. That's what it seems like to me. In other words, it doesn't matter what the people of Australia want. It doesn't matter what happens at the ballot boxes, whether it's McKinsey, whether it's other assaults on democracy that have led this group to feel pretty secure in their position. It really seems like an FU to the people of Australia in a way that is designed, and I can only say this because we've lived through it for several years in the Trump era. It's almost designed to lead citizens in a democracy to give up, to stop trying, to stop seeking accountability, to stop phoning their elected officials. And one thing I can tell you from reading the bills for American legislators here on DailyClout every week is, you may think, well, how could one side do that? Because then the power will go to the other side. But really what we see reading the bills week after week is the power kind of stays in a very narrow continuum between these two kind of inside baseball parties, with very little difference between them. There are differences, but so many of the bills are just about keeping power circulating to a small handful of super wealthy people. So I really feel like, and Trump did this by lying. And this was one of the steps in the end of America. If people lie enough, or just, like with Angus Taylor's office, don't even bother to answer questions. If you get used to the media not bothering to correct a mistake, if protesters, like in Australia, are intimidated or have their rights to assemble stripped, right? If FOIA requests are not honored, eventually people really do just kind of give up and stop expecting normal accountability from their elected officials. And I think that that's intentional, honestly. I mean, now I've seen it in country after country. I'm telling you prophetically, although it doesn't take much, because we've witnessed this now in several countries. Britain is next. You're going to have the same experience of, wait a minute, what do you mean you're not going to respond to a FOIA request? What do you mean you're going to send a cop to intimidate a 13-year-old protester? What do you mean you're going to go on vacation while the country burns? I really think people need to kind of wake up and smell the coffee. It is a message. Like, I used to be a political consultant. This is messaging. And the messaging is, we have all the power. You don't count. Nothing's going to change. And it's not even a I dare you to do something. It's this is the new reality. And it's a way of kind of hammering people into giving up on expecting the old reality of an accountable democracy, because that makes the work of oligarchs easier. And when I say oligarchs, I mean like McKinsey, I mean the international mining interests that have their sights set on Australia. I mean the people who are going to be developing that ruined, burnt out land. I don't want to be a bad prophet. I hate this role. I hate being Cassandra, but we've seen it over and over. And I'm not the Naomi who hammered this out. Naomi Klein, who wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, said, Watch what happens when there's a catastrophe. You're going to see vulture investors swooping in. I mean, I have to say, I was very struck that the wildfires are, I mean, I want to see what happens to that land, after all these catastrophes are over, because are there natural resources on that land? Is it fantastic for developing resort areas? Is there, someone sent me a really interesting map of a planned development between Sydney and Melbourne, which this person said, I couldn't see it, but this is her view, aligned with the fires. I am not saying, and I don't want this taken out of context, that the fires are not natural. What I am saying is, again and again and again, we see that natural catastrophes are jumped on. As someone once said, don't get in the way of a good disaster. We saw it with 9/11, perfect opportunity, a real horrible thing, but a perfect opportunity to get a war done that a bunch of hawks wanted to have done, that put billions of dollars in the pockets of certain interests like weapons manufacturers and Raytheon. So really keep an eye on who benefits when this crisis is all over, when these thousands of acres are ravaged and devastated and people have had to flee. Watch what happens in terms of insurance. I mean, I can tell you, in the wake of the hurricanes in New York, there were new rules put in place by FEMA to deal with flooding that really were just like vast sums in the pockets of the insurance industry. You have to get flood insurance in certain ways that don't really have anything to do with your actual risk. It's a boon to the insurance industries. So, watch what happens. And I that does not take anything away from my heart going out to the people facing this absolute catastrophe. And the air quality in Sydney, in the last a week ago, it's shocking. It's shocking that human beings and children and old people have to live in that kind of environment. It's shocking that the prime minister went on vacation and said it's because he had made a promise to his children. Lots of us make promises to our children. Then there's a work emergency, and we have obligations to people who count on us as leaders, and our children understand that. It's shocking that he plans to go ahead with fireworks, but really, I'm encouraging the beautiful people of Australia to stop being shocked. This is systematic. It's a psychological warfare to kind of beat you down into giving up, so all this stuff can go to people who have probably already made the deal. I mean, that's what I learned as a political consultant. First comes the deal, then comes the story about the deal. And often they have no relationship to each other. Lots of people are chiming in. Daisy, hi Daisy, I'm always so happy to see you, says, yay, preach it, Sister Naomi. Victrola says, the air is full of accelerant metal particulates from the geoengineering. Yeah, I mean, you've got to document that. I'm wary about going there till we have more evidence. I've thoroughly documented geoengineering all over the United States. And one thing that is really worth paying attention to, and I've talked about this, is that Australian hydros use a lot of cloud seeding. And cloud seeding puts a lot of silver oxide and silver iodide into the environment, which makes fires burn hotter. That's something that happened in Northern California. PG&E used those horrible chemicals that make fires burn hotter with their cloud seeding. They do it to steal water. And the same thing is true with Tasmania Hydro, Snowy Hydro, all these Australian hydros. By the way, Angus Taylor, I gather, is connected to a hydro. So, when the crisis is over, and I don't mean to be lecturing people who are in the middle of a horrible experience, but we have to take a look at how geoengineering that exists like cloud seeding is destroying the environment, making fires burn out of control. AZ government let 75% of let go 75% of firefighters before the fire. Wow. Thank you, Victrola13. Please keep reporting that on that. Georgie Bernard says, I hate being Cassandra too. It's no fun. Charles Pixley, our wonderful supporter, says, hi, Charles, says, manufactured crisis, death for profit. The ego is immense. I mean, I really have been thinking, Charles, about who I really think about Scott Morrison as a human being, and I do believe in cosmic justice, and somewhere there has to be some balancing for a man who would leave his nation burning to a crisp and thousands of animals burning to death and would go on vacation. I mean, that's a special kind of effed up. Faint signals from Vega. We have an evangelical end of days believer in our Australian Parliament, Scott Morrison, who I think is fine if everything goes up in flames. Faint signals. It's really interesting that you say that, and I was aware of that. Sorry for my makeup malfunction. Um, there is a weird kind of sanguine quality that is surreal observing it from outside of Australia that your leaders seem to be having. Like, well, this is all fine. It's not the time to talk about climate change. And I, I'm not surprised to hear that there's, or to think about the fact that there's an apocalyptic believer, in power. I mean, these are apocalyptic actions like, oh, God will take care of it. Everything's burning to the ground. It's in God's hands. Um, Barry Atkinson. Hi, Barry. It's so nice to have my good friends all responding in this talk. And thank you for your support of DailyClout, these good friends of mine. What you describe are corporate kingdoms of unaccountable nobility, and we the people are the serfs, unsettling. Charles Pixley talks about divine consciousness, and, let's hope there's more of that. Dusty Blue, hi Naomi, happy holidays and blessings for all you do. Thank you. And Victrola 13 says, my heart is breaking for the wildlife, especially koala bears. Victrola, I can't bear these images of the koala bears. I just feel like there's such an illustration of like crimes human beings are committing that don't have to be committed against innocent, precious angels of the natural world. So what I asked on Twitter today was, what can people outside of Australia do to help? And I got some suggestions, but I've offered to the people of Australia that I'll come and try to, put together research about the assaults they're facing on democracy, share it with them, think about connecting organizations that can help fight this. But one of the interesting things that one person said when I said, how can we help, is that they need to be shamed internationally. And I have to say, that is effective. I mean, it was effective with South Africa. It's been effective with BDS. So I will continue to keep a light shining on corruption and assaults on democracy and on nature in Australia. All of you, please help me by sending me information and links. And of course, become members of DailyClout, support us on Patreon, because that all helps us put together this research and shine a light and connect what has to be done, what should be done for people who want help. We can go vegan. Animals in paddocks are being burned alive too and suffer no less than koalas and other animals we fetishize. That is a really good point. Faint signals from Vega. And I have to say, I've been eating less and less meat since I've been seeing these images out of Australia. And you make another great point. Of faint signals from Vega. Largest study in science stated animal agriculture is a major contributor to climate crisis. Concluded a plant-based diet is the best single action we can take to address the climate emergency. And Julie Rouse, Julie, I think you're the person who sent me that important link. Thank you. Said, we've been watching it daily for months. I will put together links and cue points to them. Yes, it is clear to see types of geoengineering that's been happening with a pattern to them. I have to say, one of the first people who alerted me to geoengineering was a member of the DailyClout community who was tweeting images to me from Australia and was saying, look what happens to the sky. There's look at the cloud seeding. And what he said was very moving. He said he'd been living in the outback for 23 years or something. And he said that when he first started living there were insects everywhere. And he described all these animals that used to come to the back of his little cabin. And he said now when he turns over the earth, there are no insects. The insect life is gone. And so the birds and the little creatures that used to live on the insects are going hungry. And Victrola 13, and this is a real action step, said, yes, ecocide should be criminalized with corporations held to account. So on that note, that's a really good action step. So please keep informing me, send me the links, send us here at DailyClout the links, and we will keep reporting on, special eyes on the crisis in Australia. Now it's 20 minutes, so I need to move on to my next topic. If you're not in the United States or don't care about the articles of impeachment, this is your opportunity to sign off. But if you do care, as many of you know, we had our president, Donald John Trump, impeached. And the date of this was December 10th. And then it was referred to the Committee on the Judiciary on December 15th of this year, so 2 weeks ago. And something that, I've obviously noticed, because I'm obsessed with informing people about the real bills to give them real power, is that obviously everybody talked about the impeachment resolution, but I haven't seen anyone provide the actual text of it. It's very short. So I'm going to read you and skip over the unnecessary parts, the actual resolution of impeachment. It's HRes 755. It was introduced by my former representative, Mr. Nodler. And it says this: it's a resolution. Now, a resolution, is not the same as an act. A resolution is the sense of the Congress. So it's like Congress saying, we believe this or we believe that. It's important, obviously, and it's the first step toward the process of impeachment. But it isn't the law of the land yet. It's not the same as passing a bill. So this says, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. And many of you think, I certainly thought that that's a sentence that I would never read. There have only been 3 presidents impeached. And now he is one of them. He's gone into history having been impeached by the Congress. Resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following articles of impeachment to be exhibited in the U.S. Senate. And so what they're introducing is articles of impeachment. And this is what the founders left us. It's explaining why. Articles of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives of the U.S. in the name of itself and of the people of the U.S. against Donald John Trump, President of the United States of America, in maintenance and support of its impeachment against him for high crimes and misdemeanors. And those of you who have watched the impeachment video we did explaining what is impeachment, know that that phrase, high crimes and misdemeanors, is what you need to be accused of in order to get impeached. That's the language that was left us for articles of impeachment. Article 1, abuse of power. So you see, when they say articles of impeachment, there are really only 2 of them, and they are like the reasons. So abuse of power. So then they explain, the Constitution provides that the House of Representatives, quote, shall have the sole power of impeachment, end quote, and that the president, quote, shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And that's language from the Constitution. In his conduct of the office of President of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of the President of the United States, remember, they take an office, and to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. These are all from the oath that you swear when you become President of the United States, right? Donald J. Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in that, using the powers of his high office, President Trump solicited the interference of a foreign government, Ukraine, in the 2020 US presidential election. So that's number 1. He did this bad thing with another country. He did so through a scheme or course of conduct that included soliciting the government of Ukraine to publicly announce investigations that would benefit his reelection, harm the election prospects of a political opponent, and influence the 2020 US presidential election to his advantage. President Trump also sought to pressure the government of Ukraine to take these steps by conditioning official US government acts of significant value to Ukraine on the public announcement of the investigations. President Trump engaged in this scheme or course of conduct for corrupt purposes in pursuit of personal political benefit. In doing so, President Trump used the powers of the presidency in a manner that compromised the national security of the United States and undermined the integrity of the United States democratic process. He thus ignored and injured the interests of the nation. President Trump engaged in this scheme or course of conduct through the following means. One, President Trump, acting both directly and through his agents within and outside the US government, corruptly solicited the government of Ukraine to publicly announce investigations into a political opponent, former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr., and a discredited theory promoted by Russia, alleging that Ukraine rather than Russia interfered in the 2016 US presidential election. Two, with the same corrupt motives, President Trump, acting both directly and through his agents within and outside the United States government, conditioned two official acts on the public announcements that he had requested: A, the release of $391 million of US taxpayer funds that Congress had appropriated on a bipartisan basis for the purpose of providing vital military and security assistance to Ukraine to oppose Russian aggression, in which President Trump had ordered suspended, all right, and B, a head of state meeting at the White House, which the president of Ukraine sought to demonstrate continued United States support for the government of Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. So you get what they're saying. They're saying he conditioned the release of almost $400 million of your money on this help for his partisan efforts. B, a head of state meeting at the White House. We read that. 3, faced with the public revelation of his actions, President Trump ultimately released the military and security assistance to the government of Ukraine, but has persisted in openly and corruptingly urging and soliciting Ukraine to undertake investigations for his personal political benefit. These actions were consistent with President Trump's previous invitations of foreign interference in United States elections. So this part really hasn't been well reported, in my view. It's kind of buried, but they're saying this isn't just an isolated thing that President Trump did with Ukraine. They're saying this is a continuation of his invitation for foreign countries to interfere in the US democratic processes, which is illegal, by the way, and a violation of his oath as president. In all of this, President Trump abused the powers of the presidency by ignoring and injuring national security and other vital national interests to obtain an improper personal political benefit. He has also betrayed the nation by abusing his high office to enlist a foreign power in corrupting democratic elections. Wherefore, President Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national security and the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law. President Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. So those of you who haven't read this actual resolution might be surprised, as I am, having not read it till now. It is very strong language. It's been spun, in some of the media as, well, certainly the Republicans, understandably, are spinning it as a partisan gesture, but this is very strong language, solidly predicated on the Constitution and on the presidential oath of office. So here's Article 2. We try to be very nonpartisan here at DailyClout. I don't hear anything in that language that is partisan. It's really saying foreign governments are not supposed to interfere with our elections, and that's that. Article 2, obstruction of Congress. The Constitution provides that the House of Representatives, quote, shall have the sole power of impeachment, and that the president, quote, shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So that was read before as well. In his conduct of the office of President of the United States and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of President of the U.S. and to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, which is his oath, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Donald J. Trump has directed the unprecedented, categorical, and indiscriminate defiance of subpoenas issued by the House of Representatives pursuant to its, quote, sole power of impeachment. So they're saying he defied the subpoenas that the Congress has issued. He defied them. And that is a big deal. That has to do with the rule of law. President Trump has abused the powers of the presidency in a manner offensive to and subversive of the Constitution in that, quote, the House of Representatives has engaged in an impeachment inquiry focused on President Trump's corrupt solicitation of the government of the Ukraine to interfere in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. As part of this impeachment inquiry, the committees undertaking the investigation served subpoenas seeking documents and testimony deemed vital to the inquiry from various executive branch agencies and offices and current and former officials. So Congress is saying, we issued subpoenas. We asked for some documents and some witness testimony that was vital in our view. And then they're saying, in response, without lawful cause or excuse, President Trump directed executive branch agencies, offices, and officials not to comply with those subpoenas. President Trump thus interposed the powers of the presidency against the lawful subpoenas of the House of Representatives and assumed to himself functions and judgments necessary to the exercise of the, quote, sole power of impeachment vested by the Constitution in his House of Representatives. So this is a paragraph that I really urge you to think about and listen to very hard. It isn't too hard for you. It's basically not a partisan fight at all. What that shows is that this is a fight between Congress and the executive. They're saying it's our power to, as Congress, to request these documents. It's our power to impeach the president. It's our power to solicit and insist on testimony. And you don't have any right, as a matter of the rule of law, to refuse to give us, these witnesses and these documents. So that's number one. And then finally, number three, directing current and former executive branch officials not to cooperate with the committees, in response to which 9 administration officials defied subpoenas for testimony, namely John Michael Mick Mulvaney, Robert Blair, John Eisenberg, Michael Ellis, Preston Wells Griffith, Russell Vought, Michael Duffy, Brian McCormick, and T. Ulrich Brecht-Buell. So they named the guys. They said these guys were told not to cooperate with congressional committees, defied subpoenas for testimony. And really, I really want you to think about this, especially if you're Republicans. We are not partisan. The rule of law is so precious. What these people are saying is basically what happened in Australia, right? Trump is saying to our Congress what Australian elected officials are saying to the people of Australia. We don't care. We don't care about the rule of law. We don't care about the processes of democracy. A subpoena is legally binding. You have to respond to a subpoena, let alone from the Congress of the United States. So these 10 guys were told not to cooperate, not to respond to the subpoenas, and they didn't. And so what you really have to think about, if you're a Republican, if you're a Trump supporter or a Democrat, is this time it's a Republican president. What if a Democrat says, too bad, I'm not going to comply with the subpoenas from a Republican Congress. I'm just not going to do it. And I'm going to tell the elected officials, on the taxpayers' dime, not to comply with Congress's subpoenas. Once you have people saying, we don't care what the foundational laws what powers are assigned to Congress, then that is the end of America, right? That is the end of democracy. You cannot have the rule of law after that because it is a social contract. And when some people say, too bad, I don't care, I won't do it, then everybody says, too bad, we don't care, it's a power grab. These actions were consistent with President Trump's previous efforts to undermine the US government investigations into foreign interference in US elections. Through these actions, President Trump sought to arrogate to himself the right to determine the propriety, scope, and nature of an impeachment inquiry into his own conduct, as well as the unilateral prerogatives to deny any and all information to the House of Representatives in the exercise of its, quote, sole power of impeachment. Really listen to that. They're saying, you took all the power to yourself that belongs to us. In the history of the Republic, no president has ever ordered the complete defiance of an impeachment inquiry or sought to obstruct and impede so comprehensively the ability of the House of Representatives to investigate, quote, high crimes and misdemeanors. This abuse of power, they said, no president ever, not Republican, not Democrat, no one. This abuse of power served to cover up the president's own repeated misconduct and to seize and control the power of impeachment, and thus to nullify a vital constitutional safeguard vested solely in the House of Representatives. In all of this, President Trump has acted in a manner contrary to his trust as president and subversive of constitutional government, to the great prejudice of the cause of law and justice, and to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, President Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law. President Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. So that is the articles of impeachment. You've heard them. They're really, really striking. I'm kind of amazed. I mean, I had not read them. Pretty much none of the reporting on the impeachment of the President of the United States demonstrates the kind of noble language, especially of that last half of this document. That language is saying not, he's corrupt, he's a bad guy. That language is saying he violated the Constitution. It's a threat to the Constitution and the rule of law. No president in the history of the country has completely ignored Congress's power to impeach. And they're also reminding you, and this is something that definitely came out when we did the video on impeachment, which I will repost next to this video, that the right to impeach is not a partisan right. It is a fundamental right that Congress was given in order to address corruption. And so what they're saying is, if you take away the power of impeachment by just ignoring the power of Congress to compel you and these people to testify, then you've stolen a fundamental right from Congress that the Constitution gives you. So I really think that Republicans need to think about this. They need to think about whether this is a good precedent, stealing a fundamental power from Congress and handing it over to the executive, or whether it completely upends our system of checks and balances. So I really think this is one of those moments where, listen to this video. I'm going to embed HRES 755 in this video. You can share it. Bill Cam can let you share HRES 755 and vote on it and have your say about it, share it through social media. This is really a surprising set of paragraphs to read. Really think about if you want a giant power to be taken away from Congress, which someday may be Republican Congress, right? This is not a partisan document in my view. It's really making an argument strictly on fundamental aspects of our system of government, of checks and balances that the founders left us. So let's quickly wrap up. Have you guys heard of Jenny Hawking and her effort to get the Palace paper? I have not. Send it to me. Al Capone says, we got some clowns running this country. Look at Trump. All he has done ever since he's been in office has roasted everybody. Daisy says, right, they're acting as if they're above the law, the Constitution, that's abuse of power. And I really hope you guys see the parallels between this action of this president saying, I don't care that you've subpoenaed these 10 guys. I'm going to ignore Congress's right to make me do anything. And Scott Morrison going on vacation. Seriously, I hope you notice the similarities. The deep state runs this country. Presidents come and go, but their advisors remain the same. Victrola 13, I hear you. I kind of watching the world think there's a new set of people running things. It's not the intelligence community anymore. It's people more powerful than the intelligence community. And it's meta oligarchs, meta corporations that are more powerful than the bureaucrats who are members of the intelligence community. MS says, but Congress has been abusing its powers too. Good point. They wanted to get him impeached for one reason or the other since he got elected. Good point. I agree. What does that say about the Dems? MS, let me assure you, I identify myself as an independent these days, and again, bipartisan. That's our goal at DailyClout. But I have to say, I agree with you. I am constantly disappointed and outraged that Democrat leaders are politicizing the impeachment and saying things like, "Yeah, let's get him." It's supposed to be a somber, transpartisan obligation to clear away a corrupt leader. It's not supposed to be partisan politics. And I agree too, reading the bills every week, that the impeachment effort, which has gone on since the beginning, really has kept good legislation from getting passed and kept people focused on that theater, as important as it is, as opposed to, seeing the bills that pass every week that steal everything that isn't nailed down for people who are not you and me. Yeah, and Victrola said, yes, Naomi, they are more powerful than the intel community. Georgi Bernard said very eloquently, oversight and accountability deficit. Very true. And Charles Pixley said, every accusation is absolutely attributable to the accusers, cloaked in the elegant language of the founders, to effectuate a coup called impeachment, which started in 2016 before POTUS 45 took office. So Charles is agreeing with MS. And I think there's good points to be made. Absolutely. I mean, on both sides, the whole thing has been far too politicized, as I agreed earlier. Dusty Blue said, do you, Naomi, and others feel the reason for many in Congress going after Trump is that he is not in alignment with the global New World Order's long-term plan, one of world currency and governance? Dusty Blue, that is a really important question. And it's hard for me to answer. Because unfortunately, I think both these things are true, right? I think Trump has been targeted from the beginning, even before he got elected, by neoliberal elites because he wasn't a member of their club. And that's why, even though I'm seen as left of center, I wasn't excited about a Hillary Clinton victory because I knew that the world being in the control of neoliberal elites like her just means more dirty wars, more environmental exploitation. But so absolutely a candidate like Trump, who isn't part of that club, is going to be targeted by those people. But that said, long before he was elected, a banker in New York said, oh yeah, he owes $40 million to the Russians and they have him and we won't lend money to him. Like the banking community in New York wouldn't lend money to him anymore because he was in the pockets of the Russians. And I worry that it could be both, right? He could have been this real outsider populist who really could have shaken things up in a good way. But unfortunately, what I see right now is, and I don't want to single him out, but I think clearly people other than the United States are calling the shots in the United States right now. I think people other than the British are calling the shots in Britain. And I think people other than the Australians are calling the shots in Australia. And that's where you get into these meta interests, right? I think I definitely think Putin is trying to destroy the United States, and and it seems like Donald Trump can't help but go along with it. That's my view. I'm just being honest. That doesn't mean Democrats are treating him fairly at all. It means that a lot of things are happening at a meta level. I think that probably China has some deals involving Australian natural resources that we don't know about yet. And I think that the US is kind of running Boris Johnson, and maybe Russia and the US. Like there's this new oligarchy, right, of Russia, the United States, Brazil, the United Kingdom, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. And they're really powerful, and they're not the old blocs. They're not NATO. It's not Western Europe. It's not the special relationship. It's a new alliance of, people who can cause a lot of damage, who don't have democratic values at the forefront of the way they want the world to unfold. And it's just a pure power grab that I think people are slow to realize and grasp. And when I keep saying, you see the same game plan, you see the same tactics in Israeli elections, in Brazilian elections, in British elections, North America, because this group that has surfaced really has shared interests, and they do serve these kind of neoliberal corporate interests, and that's happening above our heads. So yes, I think people need nation states. Yes, I think populism is important. I don't dismiss the yellow jackets in France. I don't dismiss Trump's populist support. I don't dismiss, the reasons people wanted Brexit, even though I think the people in charge of Brexit are evil. I think people are losing their nations, and so they're losing self-determination. So that's a long way of saying he could have been a very positively disruptive candidate, but I don't think he has the freedom right now for these meta national reasons to engage in in serving the people who elected him for populist reasons. All right, Stephen Perry says, super great, thought-provoking stuff as always. Many thanks. Thank you. Dusty Blue says, seems so to Victrola 13, and sad as it is. And Victrola 13 says, China just bought Australia's water resources. Victrola 13, I really need to know more about that. And can some Australians please explain to me or send me at DailyClout information about why the brush fires are all around the coasts? That doesn't really make sense to me, right? Because aren't there wildernesses not just around the coasts? I keep wondering what is causing fires to kind of encircle the outer rim of Australia. Yeah, Dusty Blue raises the issue of AI technology, which we have to go into in the future, of course. One Faith says Trump boasts of torture. That alone is grounds for impeachment, shows how rogue the American government has gone. Absolutely, and this began in the Clinton years, actually, and really ramped up with Bush and Obama. MS says the chaos theory can only work when there is some level of chaos already existing in the system. People like Putin, Krigan exploit the existing cracks, wounds. Very true. And I think you've really said something important, MS, which is what you're seeing in Australia and in the United States is the creation of chaos, and a chaos of meaning as well. I mean, that's why, I'm so concerned about Australia, because they're facing, this gaslighting thing is really a way for politicians to say meaning is over, right? There's nothing but chaos and confusion and disorder, because again, that beats people down into giving up and not being able to organize. And I agree that Putin is very good at exploiting chaos. So the Inter-Bering Railway is going in the outer rim of Australia, says Victrola 13. Send me a map. I don't want to be the person to identify any correlations there, but it's really worth knowing what's planned in Australia. And I know that that I was sent as I mentioned, a map showing a development and a railway between Sydney and Melbourne that people were concerned about. So, as I said on Twitter, and earlier, you you can't say that these catastrophes are started for the purpose of exploiting them, but exploiting catastrophes is how a lot of disaster capitalism works, as the other Naomi has pointed out. Um, and Victrola brought up something that really has to be looked into, even though people can attack us. Believe it or not, there are ionospheric heaters. There really are. I've talked to the scientist who's in charge of that, and it's confirmed. It's in the peer-reviewed journals. People really are not asking enough questions or any questions about why put ionospheric heaters in the atmosphere in a world that's already warming. But I really think we need to bring down those ionospheric heaters. They're also directed at the Arctic, by the way. They're microwaves in space. Why have microwaves in space, right? Obviously, it's not a good idea. Um, and I'm going to leave that there. We have been talking for 50 minutes. It's such an honor. It's so wonderful to speak with you all. It's so wonderful to get the information that you share with us at Daily Clout. All of the stories we've covered have come from you. This is the news outlet that you are in charge of. And I just want to say, as the year wraps up, it's almost the end of 2019. Because of you and stories that you alerted us to, we've been reporting on geoengineering since 2017, and now the rest of the mainstream media has caught up. We were the first at a national level to really report on the missing and murdered Native American women, which is such a crisis, also a crisis in Australia and in Canada. We have been consistently reporting on laws being passed at the state level, now the federal level, to criminalize criticism of Israel and to criminalize people who talk about the BDS movement. We were among the first to give you videos on what is impeachment. We made the tax bill available to you on video, then broke it down on Twitter. We made the healthcare bill broken down and available on Twitter, and explained to you that it wasn't going to cover cancer, it wasn't going to cover maternity care. This is really, I'm not naturally this nerdy and wonky. This is really hard work to bring you such high quality information and to take your notices that you sent us. By the way, the last thing is 5G. We, because of you, have been following that story, which is turning out to be so widely documented as a human health problem. It takes research, it takes hosting costs, it takes data costs, it takes developer costs to give you BillCam and to bring you these videos. It may look casual because I'm here with my dog in the background, but it really takes a lot of work. So please, it helps so much if you become a member. $3.99 a month, that classic, like a latte and a half. Become a member of Daily Clout, or go to Patreon and give us a recurring membership. We have people who recur at $10 a month, people who recur at $50 a month. We had once in a while we get a gift of $200 a month, $300 a month, whatever it is you can do. It's really the recurring gifts that are so important for us, those subscriptions. Do it. Especially the end of the year, think about putting your money where your values are. I don't know another news outlet that actually reads you the bills and then builds a database you can share them and lobby them. This is the last thread of transparency we have. And we're fighting for democracy, and we're fighting following your lead. We're amplifying your voice. So this is me, Naomi Wolf. We talked about Australian crisis. We read HRES 755, the impeachment of Donald Trump, and I'm standing by to talk to you on email, to support your memberships, to hear what you want me to cover, and to join forces with you in saving democracy. Thank you for being here. It's Naomi Wolf. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.